They say there are 3 things you don't talk about in polite company:
And we just made a podcast about all of them.
politics, religion, sex, and a few other things that'll get you uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner.
So grab a drink, loosen your belt, maybe hide this one from your boss.
Welcome to the Unmentionables. Hey everyone, I'm Evan, the guy with way too many questions and just enough nerve to ask them.
And I'm Melissa, therapist, mom, and here to answer those questions before the arguments start.
So here's how it works. I bring the curiosity, the wait, why is that a thing energy, and Melissa keeps us from setting the whole conversation on fire.
Most of the time.
Second session, not the 20th, not after a year of history taking and careful work, the second session. A 42-year-old woman sits down with a therapist she was referred to by someone she trusted. Good credentials, good reputation, and before that therapist has heard a single word from anyone else in her life, she's told to cut off her mother. And she does it. And then she told the Wall Street Journal it was an argument made from authority, and so she followed it. That ran on July 22nd alongside a survey of 7,000 estranged parents, a third of whom believe their child's therapist is the reason that they didn't get phone calls anymore. Within 2 days, there were a dozen shows on it, one of which used the words "destroying families" in the title. I'm going to be honest about that survey up front. It's 7,000 people describing a room they were never in. It measures what parents believe, not what therapists did. Set that down. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is people making the strongest version of this argument aren't pundits. They're therapists. One of them trains other therapists on this exact subject for the American Psychological Association. And my guest today is a licensed clinical social worker with decades in the field. She's a trauma specialist, EMDR certified, IFS, polyvagal, somatic work, which is to say, she's precisely the therapist that they're describing as the enemy. She's also my wife. Melissa, they're talking shit about you. Are they wrong?
I think they're all wrong. And not talking from, a deep knowledge of the world that I live in, for sure.
Well, I want you to say more, and I think we will over the course of this episode. Before you decide what you think about this, you probably need to know who's saying it. So we'll start with Bill Doherty, whatever.
I've never heard of him.
Professor Emeritus of Family Social Science at the University of Minnesota, 40 years as a practicing family therapist. He built a modality called discernment counseling, specifically to slow down couples who are about to end a marriage too fast. And in 2016, he co-founded Braver Angels, the nonprofit that gets Republicans and Democrats in a room to stop them from hating each other. His day job is depolarization. This isn't a man with a culture war agenda. Now, I will just caveat this by saying I'm relatively comfortable in political circles, and I've never heard of Braver Angels.
Well, and I don't think he's doing such a great job. If his job is to get people to work together in rooms.
I feel like we might be at the height of polarization between the political parties at this point.
Causes me to question.
And I think there's a lot less bipartisan work being done.
I absolutely agree.
Than ever before. So I don't really know how good he's doing over there, but right. Whatever. And then there's Josh Coleman, a practicing psychologist, trains clinicians on family estrangement for the APA. He says he gets letters constantly from adult children whose therapist told them their parent wasn't ready for family therapy, a parent that therapists has never really spoken to, and who in Coleman's own caseload often is ready.
How would he know that if he doesn't meet them because they're not ready?
It's a great question.
Asking for a friend.
It's a great question.
And I say that because I've sat in rooms when parents are ready, and I've sat in those rooms with...
Why are they talking?
Well, first of all, these are not my people, because how old are they? Do we know that? I mean, if he's been in practice for 40 years...
I would say that Doherty is probably,
the age of my parents.
Maybe?
He's probably the age of my parents, or our parents, right? And that's the generation of people that are struggling here with navigating adult relationships with their adult children. So I would go out on a limb and say he's probably had some of these struggles with his own children if he has them. I don't know about the second one that you named. Not sure how old he is.
Josh Coleman. I know nothing about Josh Coleman, the psychologist. I think
Sure.
probably about our age is where I
Okay.
would put him, maybe a little bit older than us.
Sure. And I think it's important to note that neither of are trauma trained, trauma certified, or trauma specialists. And so for them to speak on behalf of what they believe is happening in a trauma therapy room, I also think is pretty wild.
I mean, we should probably put it in context. This guy's an Oprah guy. So he goes on Oprah and Sesame Street, and
Oh, gotcha.
he does all of the,
Okay.
woe is me type stuff. I suppose I'm just going off of his website. I'm being a little unfair to Josh Coleman, but Josh, if you hear this and you would like to
I would love to
respond or
have a
debate, or even
conversation.
Bill, you might have some free time, because I don't think that AOC and MTG is gone. So
Well,
she lost her mind, but I don't think AOC and Rand Paul are having any great discussions these days.
yeah,
So
I don't think so.
let's
No.
figure that one out. But anyway, where's your bar? Not in principle. Give me a case that sits under that bar, and
Sure.
one that maybe sits over top of that bar.
I get cases like this all the time, actually. And most often, there are going to be a lot of exceptions to this. But it's someone about our age. I'm going to go with somebody in their 40s. And they're struggling with relationship with their parent. And we start out by just kind of sorting through what are the issues going on here. And when we look at what those issues are, most of what we find is the older adult is struggling with control. They want to control how their child is now parenting their own children. And it's different from how the older parent did. So there's issues with wanting open access and wanting things to follow the same paths and patterns that they did because of how they grew up. And we really are in a generation that's saying, hey, look, there are things that my parents did well, and there are things that they didn't do so well. And that's okay. We want to do them different. And when you have a parent come in and say, you're doing this wrong, you're not parenting right, what's wrong, with your kid, and they're having these problems, and you should do this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, I think as actual grown ass adults, we are not responding well to that. And we're actually willing to say, that's not how I'm going to choose to do things. So you can accept that and take a step back, or you can not accept that and keep coming at me, and then I'm not going to want to be around you.
Yeah, no, I hear that quite clearly. I guess there's a question, right? So that there is an apparent. I'll give the 7,000 parents from the survey the benefit of the doubt. There is an apparent increase in the number of family estrangements. I think just in general, in our own lives, we've seen that
Sure.
kind of activity.
Do you want to know what it is, though?
I would love to.
It is adults recognizing that we are not bound to be in relationship with people just because we are related by blood. So blood is not a tie. And unfortunately, generations that have come before us believe, blood means everything, and you can't ever disagree with or go against or even call out people. You just need to make peace and suck it up and respect your elders and sit down and be quiet and do what you're told. And it doesn't matter if we are 42-year-old adults or if we're 5-year-old children. Respect your parents.
Yeah, no, and that's a big part of this too. And I wanted to ask about this. Are we at a stage where our parents or parents are just they're unable to change their ways? They're unable to allow us to be different or allow the kids to be different that are parenting, and it, isn't that more on the older generation than it is the younger generation in terms of that? Doesn't that make it more difficult?
So, like I said, well, I believe everybody can change. They just have to want to. And what I run into the most is this older generation going, I don't need to change anything. I'm old. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. So, you, child, just need to do what you're told. And what we see is children standing up and saying, no, you are the one that wants relationship here. And this is what I need to feel safe and secure and sane. And there's a huge difference between boundaries and control. Okay. And it is all about how we frame it. So a boundary is about me and what I need and what I am willing to do for myself. So, for example, hey, mom, I hear that you have some really strong opinions on how I'm raising my kids. And I will hear you out. And then I'm going to make my own decisions. And if you continue to keep coming at me about how wrong I am, I'm going to limit how much I am engaging with you. Control would be, Mom, you're not allowed to talk about this with me anymore. Control is me trying to dictate what you do or don't do. Boundaries are me limiting my own circle. And I mean, honestly, and this is sessions and sessions and sessions in, the conversations that we're having in an actual trauma therapy room is boundaries are flexible. Boundaries ebb and flow and shift and change as somebody else engages with them or denies that they exist. And unhealthy people don't like boundaries. They see them as punishment and consequence. So inevitably, when you're working with somebody who's willing to grow and change and adapt, and I have many of these older people that come through my office, and sometimes it's just as simple as, is me saying this going to build relationship with my child or is it going to damage relationship with my child? Maybe I should keep my mouth shut.
No, that's great. And I appreciate you bringing it into the therapy room because that's where this really needs to go, right? We have a sociologist, Allison Pugh. She has a term that Joshua Coleman borrowed called detachment brokers. And the idea is that trauma therapists, essentially, I mean, I'm just putting it out there. He didn't say this maybe directly or exactly, but I got it from what I heard and from what I've read that he said that professionals, trauma professionals who lend their authority to dissolve someone's guilt and obligation. So as a trauma therapist, would you accept that label or would you reject it as a whole directed at trauma therapists in general?
So I don't know. And maybe I'll share with you and then you can tell me where I land on it. But as a trauma therapist, our focus is on healing and growing and building healthy relationships. So first of all, no therapist should be telling you what to do. Let's just start there. It is not my job to tell you to cut anybody off. It's my job to help you explore what that relationship looks like, how that relationship has become what it is, and to look at you as my client. What can you do to shift this dynamic? Because often when my client shifts the way they're seeing something, perceiving something, or handling something, which is out of reaction, out of a response to things that have been done throughout their lifetime, but when they can re-look at how they're engaging, most often the other person will shift right along with them. And it opens dialogue. We want family support. I am the queen of It Takes a Village. takes a village to raise those kids. And Lord knows, as parents, sometimes we need to get away from them and let somebody else do some heavy lifting for a little while. And to have that family support would be amazing. It just needs to be healthy. And when we can't have a conversation with somebody without it turning into conflict, when we can't address something that is maybe bothering us or that we want to do differently, that the other person is so shut down to that, it shuts down communication.
It does. And I think you're hitting on something that it kind of, it strikes itself out to me, or stands out to me. I keep seeing this term, and the woman who spoke to Wall Street Journal said it, and then in this question I asked it. We keep referring to therapists as having this authority, quote unquote, and yes, you're professionals, right? You have maybe more insight into how the brain works and how the body reacts to how the brain is processing certain things. And I'm not a therapist, but sometimes I talk like I'm in the room with one.
You're often in the room with one, just for the record.
But from everything that I've ever heard, being involved with what you do and around, trauma therapists and in this, office at Heart for Change, I've never heard you guys really speak of yourselves as some authoritarian or a person who's making decisions for their clients. It's always been sort of, you're a guide on a journey. You're not, a director.
Correct.
Is that?
I'm a guide along for the ride.
Yeah. And where people are going down a destructive route, you might nudge and say, hey, can we think about this?
Can we look at this from some other perspectives?
But you don't go tell them what to do, right?
No, because if it doesn't go well, then it's my fault. And I often have people say, just tell me what to do. And I can't tell you what to do. I can help you explore the different pathways. I can help you evaluate the quality of a relationship, whether it's bringing you peace or whether it's bringing you conflict. We can constantly, I work with people who say, I really want to have a relationship with this person. And every time we interact, I walk away just feeling defeated. And what does that do to someone's overall mental health? And the answer, at least in my office, would very rarely be to put up a brick wall. In fact, we talk a lot about how it doesn't have to be all or nothing. All or nothing thinking is unhealthy. So even if we're leaving the door cracked, we're still connecting with someone on holidays or responding to that text that they might occasionally send, even if all they do is talk about themselves and never actually try to have a full relationship, the door's still open. So when we talk about therapists telling people to cut people off, I struggle with that ethically because it's just not ethical. I just had an experience where another therapist allegedly told someone to promise her that she would not go back to her parents' home until issues were resolved. And those issues are really just about communication. And it's caused a greater divide because instead of now moving towards healing with two adults that really are working on, making some changes and being healthier as individuals, this other clinician is pulling that child away from that healing process. And that's not okay.
Yeah. So you brought up the ethics, and I want to get to that in the next segment here, but I do have a couple of other things that I wanted to touch on with you. And one of them you kind of just brought up as well with this more recent case, or this case you just cited. One-sided data is structurally unavoidable in these kinds of sessions, right? You get your client's viewpoint. You almost never get the viewpoint of the other people. Now, I will say that with a caveat: when you do family therapy or you do some of the more holistic family-centered therapy practices that you and this office engage in, you do get to have a little bit more of a sense of who's telling who what. And it's maybe not always the same therapist, but like in this office, I know there are some families that come and each individual family member will see somebody else in the office, but then you as clinicians have an opportunity to sort of discuss what the dynamics are and maybe get a better sense of what that looks like. Not everybody has that. Not every therapist has that ability. So what, as a therapist, what compensates for the fact that you're almost always getting that one-sided data?
Well, we have to know that. And being in this field, as you said, it makes me feel old, but for decades.
It's
I
only been 21.
am, yeah, it's like brand new then, 21. It's the beginning. So I have a very strong understanding that I am getting one side of a story. There's a whole other side, and truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. And that is why it's so important to question perspectives and motivations and intentions and look outside this box with compassion for the other person and say, where might I have gone wrong? Because really, that old adage that when you point the finger at somebody else, the other three more are pointing back at you. And that's something huge that we talk about in our offices is I need to first look at myself before I look to blame somebody else. What is my role in this? It's something that we like to call personal accountability.
That's an interesting concept. I don't know that this country's ever heard of that before.
I'm not sure.
I want to touch on another thing before we move on to the ethics piece. And I think this is something that maybe comes with the territory. Clients coming in here that are pre-diagnosed by social media. They've been on social media or AI now, and they've asked ChatGPT about their scenario, and they've gotten some kind of I don't know, therapy speak response that's probably not even remotely accurate. How do you deal with that kind of a situation? Is it a lot of rewinding and unpacking to get them back to basics, or how do you deal with those kinds of clients that come in here already knowing what's wrong with them, quote unquote, but probably not knowing what's wrong with themselves?
You might want to just fill people in on like all the facial expressions you just saw me walk through.
Yeah. She pretty much answered all of it with a bunch of, there wasn't an eye roll, but it almost got to that point.
Yes, because AI does not replace clinicians. And when you have a really good clinician, awesome. You think that this is what you have, but I'm going to travel down all the differential diagnostic paths to see what else is there and what else might be masking for something that you don't even know to ask your AI.
It's a great point. And that brings me to sort of going into the ethics piece as we transition here. Joshua Coleman, again, he says a lot of this has to do with career stage, and his early work was really bad because he hadn't lived enough yet. You're talking about a really good clinician. I can only assume that you become a really good clinician through practice and repetition and doing the work and doing the job. You don't generally start that. I mean, maybe you did because you're awesome and amazing at everything, but not everybody can be you. So they probably start out making some mistakes. And along those lines, like, what did you get wrong in your first 5 years that you would handle differently now?
Well, I think first I want to address the fact that you missed a piece of becoming an excellent clinician. And what you missed was doing the work on ourselves or with another clinician, right? Is diving through our own issues so that they do not impact someone in the therapy room. And those of us that are doing trauma work, that are really great at what we do, have been through therapy or in therapy or in and out of therapy. We're addressing our own stuff. And when we talk about that younger generation of clinicians, you're talking about a shift in the education as well. And just a lack of insight into what their own issues are that I think are then being put out. I've worked with many, many interns over the years, and I got to a point where I haven't even been willing to take any anymore because this generation is on a struggle bus. So I can see that perspective of maybe we're talking about brand new baby clinicians that are not at all good at what they're doing and have a lot of learning to do. But again, that really is on the client to know, who am I seeing? And I'll tell you, I have had people say, but I can't get into your schedule on Thursday nights at 7:00 only. I'm like, well, you're either going to pick the availability or you're going to pick the quality. And there are plenty of people who end up going to a huge practice with brand new baby clinicians, and who knows what they're told from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about the ethics. I want to get into where the lines really are drawn. And I want to be as exact as possible about where the line is, because I think everybody's sort of arguing past it right now. Everybody's arguing that the therapist discussed going no contact with the parents. And sometimes that's the right call, I think, based on
Sometimes
what
it
you
is.
said. And maybe even the only call. If it's destructive, right, that's maybe the only thing you can do is sever ties, cut contact, and hopefully that distance resolves things,
Well,
or at least calms them down,
when
right?
we're talking about abuse, and we're talking especially about one party not taking accountability, then sometimes no contact absolutely can be the right call. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are abusive, this might shock you, but they're not going to take accountability for what they're doing. They're going to blame the other person and they're going to play the victim.
Yeah, what is the thing you always say? Narcissists won't ever be fixed in therapy because they won't ever show up.
Correct. They might show up for a couple sessions, but that'll be the extent of it.
So the violation here really isn't that. It's rendering a clinical judgment about a person who isn't even your client, who you've never even assessed,
Right.
and doing it in such a short period of time. And the APA ethics code says that opinions about individuals require an examination adequate to support them. In fact, again, I'm not a therapist, but I know that I've watched enough court TV to know that's pretty much what therapists say when you are asked to render a judgment about somebody that you're like, no,
That we've
I
never
can't.
treated.
Yeah, my ethics say I can't do that. I've never
Which
treated
is
that person.
exactly why my focus is on my client and what my client has control over and what their choices are.
Right. And the NASW code says the decision belongs to the client,
Correct.
as you say, which cuts both ways, really, by the way. Steering someone towards a cutoff violates it exactly as much as steering them towards reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
And Coleman's example is one sentence: narcissists can't change.
They can.
Said about a mother that the clinician had never met.
Right.
It's used to shut down family therapy before it started.
Right. And so, narcissists can change if they choose to engage in the process. They just most often will not choose to engage because they don't believe they're the problem. Everybody else is the problem.
Right.
You won't find them most often in that therapy room.
So they're not Morgan Wallen.
Huh?
I'm the problem.
Oh, correct. But the other piece of what you're saying there is we can't call somebody that. And that's why the narcissism term has gotten such a bad rap, because of people just using it flagrantly instead of recognizing maybe this is somebody that has some narcissistic traits. But we can't go in and lay labels on people that we've never met or interacted with.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because I think about, people that I've known, or you've seen online, the influencers that are out there yelling narcissist or fascist or whatever they're yelling. They're calling people names they've never met, they've never talked to, they don't know them. And they're using some of the therapy terms, a lot of the therapy terms, especially that come out of um, the type of therapy that you
They're
do,
misusing
and they're
them.
misusing them. They're mislabeling a lot of the trauma therapy that they're hearing it somewhere. I don't know where. Maybe it's the trauma therapy influencers or something on TikTok.
Maybe.
And they're like, oh, that sounds like a fun word, I should use that.
Mhm.
And they really don't understand what it means. And I think that's a dangerous component of this. And it's broader and broader. But second session, like, what
That's
we know that
wild.
she shouldn't have said that, but
That
like,
is wild
what
to
should
me.
the therapist have said instead of cut contact after
Can
2
you
sessions?
read it again? What was said?
Yes. I have to find it. It's at the beginning of our work here. A 42-year-old woman sat down with her therapist that she was referred to by someone she trusted, good credentials, good reputation, and before that therapist has heard a single word from anyone else in her life, she's told to cut off her mother. So we're
Right.
getting this. We're obviously not getting the case notes from the therapist.
Sure.
We don't know exactly the words that were used,
Right.
but this 42-year-old woman is saying that the therapist on session 2 said, I've heard enough, cut her off.
Which is unfathomable to me, because you're telling that client what to do, first of all. So what should she have done? Maybe walked through, wow, because we don't know what was disclosed and we don't know the validity of what was disclosed. So if a client comes in convinced that they're going to cut somebody off, and they walk in saying, these are all the horrendous things that my parent has done to me, I'm over it, I'm done. Okay, well, what are your options? Where do you feel like, you can maybe explore this more? What's my role here as your therapist? Because it sounds like you've already made a decision. Or they're going to come in and they're going to say, which is most often the case, is they know something's wrong. They know it doesn't feel good. But most people walk in saying adamantly they do not want to cut somebody off. They're blaming themselves for the problems. They're taking way too much accountability and trying to deflect everything because that's what they learned throughout childhood is keep quiet, deflect, just go with it. And so they're trying to figure out, how do I make my world better? And eventually we circle around to, you can fix all of this inside of you, and we still have this external factor that's going to come at you. And that's when we need to decide, am I going to engage in this process with this other person, see if they'll come to therapy, see if they'll talk through things? Am I going to just change how I feel about their behaviors? Am I just going to radically go from being annoyed and agitated and angry to being okay with things because this is just the way they are? Am I going to increase my distress tolerance? Just teach myself to handle more and more and more, and that happens through exposure? Or am I just going to blow things up and make everything worse? Those are the 4 options that you really have in any situation. And it's a DBT concept, dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's often what I go back to with many of my clients is we have these 4 options. What are you currently doing? And what might you want to choose differently?
Yeah. So where's the line between this is a boundary and cut them off? And does a good clinician put an expiration date on one? Don't come back to me until this is done?
No, that would be bad. We have an unconditional regard for our clients. And I say this regularly, actually, like, hey, I know this is what you're working toward. And I recognize that you might make a baby step or you might take a step back between now and the next session. Either way, it's okay. There's no judgment in this space because that's how this stuff works. And that's why I say it's a super red flag when somebody comes in saying they want to cut somebody off. that tells me a lot about who they are actually, not necessarily about who the parent is. So again, control is I'm putting restrictions or requirements on what you must do. Boundaries are me navigating myself and what I will do. So again, if I'm struggling because my mother is showing up at my house unannounced and just walking in the front door, right? The first step would probably be to lock the front door and have a conversation with my mom that says, Mom, I'm really not comfortable with this. So I need you to let me know if you want to come over because I might be busy. Oh, I don't care if you're busy or not. I'll just swing by anyway. Okay, but Mom, if I don't know you're coming, I'm not going to be available. And then Mom might show up and find a door locked. And then we're going to have that conversation again. Hey, Mom, that's because I let you know. I need that heads up from you. And we try to re-teach boundaries because our parents' generation is not a generation of boundaries. They don't understand them. They don't know them. They were not taught them. This is something really fairly new in our generation. So I want you all to consider these 5 things in your own therapist if you have one. And it's how to spot a really great therapist. And this one kind of is, or maybe not a great therapist. Does your therapist use diagnostic labels for people they've never met? Because that would not be a great one. Number 2 is, have they ever asked what the other person would say? That's looking at different perspectives, and that is a positive thing. Have they ever suggested you might be wrong about something? Again, we need to question our own logic and why we've arrived where we've arrived. Have they offered family work or ruled it out on your behalf? We should be willing to do the family work. We should be offering the family work or referring out for the family work. And are you leaving sessions capable or more certain? Are you better able to navigate through your life? Are you gaining a better understanding of yourself?
What does someone do if that list made them nervous about their own therapist?
Run fast, and just know you can interview therapists. You can ask therapists how they work. And if something doesn't feel right, bring it up with your therapist because a lot of them aren't great and have their own bias.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of them would welcome the opportunity to understand you better because if they can do that with you, they can use that with the next one that comes in, right? It's
Absolutely.
a learning process. So listen, this has been a great discussion. I think the easy ending here is therapy good, bad therapist bad.
Correct.
Still go get help.
Yes, from a good one, not a bad one.
But that's both true and useless, really. So here's what I actually took from this discussion. The people making the strongest version of this argument, they're not really trying to shut down therapy. They are therapists. One of them spends his weekends trying to get politicians in a room to stop them from hating each other. They love this work, and they're saying that somewhere along the way, the job quietly changed from helping you carry it to telling you to put it down and walk. However, they're also saying that from a position of a lack of understanding about the type of therapy that you do. And I think that it's important to understand that not all therapists are the same.
Correct.
That not all therapists think the same way. It's just like pretty much anybody else in this world. They have their own opinions. They have their own biases. They have their own approaches. They are not as trauma informed. They don't quite understand the work that you do and your office does. And maybe their way of therapy, their way of work, their way of doing things works for certain people. I think that you would probably, correct me if I'm wrong, say the same about your business. It doesn't work for everyone. And not every therapist is a perfect fit for everybody that comes in as a prospective client.
Yeah.
Trauma therapy is a specific and very
Specialized.
form of therapy. There's
Sure
lots of
is.
different methodologies. There's lots of different modalities that are used across the therapeutic spectrum.
Mhm.
Okay. And what I don't typically hear, maybe it happens and I just haven't heard it, but what I don't typically hear is trauma therapists going out on a limb and telling everybody that the, I don't know, old school therapists, whatever we might call those people who aren't trauma informed,
Right?
are horrible.
No.
We don't hear that.
No.
It's just that trauma therapy is for a certain kind of individual.
It's a niche.
It's for a certain,
Mhm.
niche element of
Right.
people out there. It's not for everybody. Sometimes there's a deep level of trauma, hurt, pain that's been caused, and it doesn't have to be physical abuse, but some kind of abuse is generally associated with this, right?
Yes.
That's where trauma therapy comes in. If you just need somebody to work through your neuroses, your internal neuroses, I think you could probably just go, find Mr. Coleman
It's a generalist.
and just have a discussion. It's,
Sure.
it's the therapist from Designated Survivor,
Yes.
right?
Dr. Loudon.
You go see Dr. Loudon and he'll talk with you about things, and there's no deeper diving there.
Right.
But for someone who's been wounded, someone who's been, abused in some way, rape victims, or people who have just been in a narcissistic relationship, or, taught from an early age through much of their life that their value is less than. Those are trauma areas where it's important that you talk about things in a certain way, that you dive into certain areas of the brain and how it works. And I think you would probably say, and I'll let you say it, but I think it's very true that there are different ways to look at this, and different things work for different people.
It's very true. And some of what you're talking about is complex developmental trauma. And especially there, when we talk about healing, we're talking about going back to the sources of those hurts and restoring relationship and healing those fractures that happened. We're not talking about cutting off and walking away.
Yeah, and I think again we got to go back to what is a therapist really at their core, right? A
Right.
therapist isn't a judge for your family; they're a referee. Time out. Hold on. Let's talk about this. Let's figure it out. They're a guide. They're an arbitrator. They're somebody who's there to try to create harmony, but don't
And-
manufacture it.
And challenge your own narrative. Because often we create a narrative in our mind, we fill in the gaps to support what we want to believe. And a good therapist is going to challenge that narrative and look for alternatives to it.
Yeah, so their job is to make you strong enough to decide, and
Question.
even harder than that, to leave you as someone who can still be wrong about your own story.
Yep.
And be okay with being wrong.
Yeah. Our job truly is to challenge how you're thinking.
Yeah, and a good one gives you that judgment. A bad one gives you theirs, and then they call it healing.
Right.
So, Melissa, last one, not for the audience, but for you. What's the standard you hold yourself to that if you broke it, I could call you out on it?
Sure. I don't ever tell anybody what to do. I am there to help you figure out what you want, what's going to help you move forward, because something's not going well. And that line is very clear. It is never my job to tell you what to do.
This has been another episode of the Unmentionables podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope that we have been able to share valuable perspectives that can help you in your own life. We want your feedback on future content. You can find us on the web at podcast.theunmentionablespod.com, where you can follow us and subscribe for subscriber-only content like the Equalizer series, where we break down topics with truth and analyze the narratives we hear today to decide what's really going on. You can reach out to us on the social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at The Unmentionables Podcast, on X at UnmentionablesX. Each episode also includes a text link in the description, and of course, if you follow us on your favorite podcast platform, you can send us comments and requests there. We're so grateful that you take the time to listen to us, and we want you to know that we appreciate your interest in what we do.